Oh,
Welcome back, guys. I was going to say officially 2022. Well, we've been in 2022 for a while now. But we're here, the full squad. Nathan's in Mexico with the cartels officially converted. He's going to be El Chapo's drug runner. So just FYI, if you do see him on BBC News, it says white boy convicted of cocaine smuggling. Just know Nathan is going to be doing the last few podcasts, basically. But starting off today, we wanted to actually talk about something that we've never really, well, we probably have discussed it in various different episodes, but we're kind of bringing it together. Do you want to kick it off with this subject that, we spoke about it briefly last week after the podcast, and I think it'd be good to, run with it today.
Yeah, so I went to this business boot camp, which was incredible. And part of what those coaches are, they're actually kind of life coaches, NLP coaches. They're very skilled in what they do and been trained by some big balls, big bosses in the industry.
big balls.
And they were really good at breaking things down in terms of system strategies, how you look at things. But something that I really picked up and where I had a lot of my own breakthroughs, because part of doing things like this is actually to realize where you are faulty, where you lack, so that you can actually start working on them. And they came up with this concept of the 6 deadly traits of that's stopping you from being successful in whatever modality you choose to work on. So in our case, we say that it's health and fitness and getting people to a specific physique, right? What's stopping you from actually being your best version? And I wanted to bring them up, and then I wanted to have your guys take on it as well. What you guys see in your clients, where you see maybe in yourself as these comes up, because guess what? We all have them and they show up. Yep. Maybe at different times in our life when we slip into them, like we tend to be good and then we slip into traits. And then maybe what you guys do when you recognize that you're slipping into 1 or 2 or 5 or all 6 of them, and then how do you get out? Because I think we want to make this practical also for the listener so that they can recognize where they are, but also then how do I deal with it? How do I manage that? How do I have a breakthrough?
Is this like it's like picking your nose and eating it, or is it more like mental?
Say that first one again.
Is it like picking your nose and eating it? Is that a deadly trait, or is it more emotional or mental sides that we're talking about?
I mean, if you're really hungry, I'm just kidding. No, more like characteristics that you either you run them, or you are unaware that you run them, but they are the thing that stops you from taking action forward, right? Yeah. So the very first one is the perfectionist.
I know what we're going to talk about. I've been reading about this all week, by the way. Okay. Not the 6 deadly sins, because it's been called something different. But okay, cool. I know what we're talking about this week now. Thank God.
And then also, like, what is then perfectionist? It's like you're waiting for all of your ducks to align, and then you can take action. You're actually literally waiting for the illusion to become true. Yeah. So that
which is a lot of people, right?
Which is a lot of people. And I know I raised my hand that used to be me. Like I derailed so much action, because it was not perfect enough. I didn't find the right font. I hadn't anything that's like just stopping you because you think it needs to be perfect actually robs you from success. It's the number one thing that kills your success. Number one.
Yeah. I have an interesting experience with this. So I've been the opposite of perfectionism all my life. Like I'm literally the guy who does things 98% and then fucks the last 2 because I just can't be asked. Or I just have the ability not to do the last 2%. My mum calls it be a completer finisher. And then she's told me since I was younger, Nathan, you need to be a completer finisher. And obviously when your mum tells you something, you do the opposite. So I just did what was good to me. So I'm a creator. I'm a creative, which is basically has an idea, puts it in action very, very quickly, puts a system in place, but then doesn't dot the I's, doesn't cross the T's. But what I've been recently finding out when we're looking at these unhelpful thinking patterns, which is perfectionism as well, is I'm a perfectionist when it comes to other people that I care about, as opposed to myself.
What do you mean with that?
So like, let's say, for example,
in a coaching standpoint, right? I'm guessing a coaching standpoint.
Not even, no, not like an intimate personal standpoint. So like when it's with my parents, not intimate, but like when it's like relationships that are close to me, like parents or other half, I have a really deep sense of like perfectionism because I want it to be perfect for those particular things. But I'm also on the other end of the spectrum when I come to myself because I prioritize other things over that perfectionism because I think I've trained myself into a way of thinking that I just need to get things out. I need to just do things and doing will just be okay. But I noticed that there was this paradox when actually in certain aspects of my life, not the whole sphere, I was then being this perfectionism, which was holding me back from just like enjoying, embracing and getting on with stuff and just, doing the do and actually being okay with that thing that I'm doing really well in another aspect of my life being here in that side. So when I'm with my parents and we plan trips or we do bits and bobs, I'm always like worrying and making sure that it's perfect. And then I always like lose myself. It's always unenjoyable because I'm too worried about what they're doing or making it perfect. And I'm trying to dot the I's and cross the T's in that aspect. But then that's not me completely. Like I'm over here being a creator, but in that aspect of my life, like for example, I bought Mills some flowers the other week because I was leaving, trying to get some brownie points up. And they came and one of them was like, it was derelict, it was shit. And I, in the deep sense of me, I really was disappointed. I've never been that disappointed in my whole life. Like even when everything was going on, so disappointed that this flower came and it was focused so shit because it wasn't perfect. Or we go for dinner and it wasn't perfect. And I'm like, I wanted that to be really, really good. And I get disappointed because it's not perfect. And then she just looks at me and goes, the fuck are you got a face on you for? And I'm like, because it wasn't as nice. We went for a roast dinner and they had no vegan options and she's vegan. And I was really upset because they had no vegan options and she had to eat a salad. And I was there eating a fucking roast dinner with them, all the trimmings. And I just felt so guilty because I was like, it's perfect for me, but it's not perfect for you. And I'm really disappointed about that. So anyway, back to the normal stuff. But I've noticed that in certain spheres in my life, I'm perfect or have a perfectionist mechanism, which is not making me enjoy those particular parameters when it's not like that versus my normal day-to-day. So I don't know if you guys have it in certain spheres or you're like always that way.
Yeah, but
have you realized I was gonna say, have you realized with that one there was a lot of like things you couldn't control, where you felt like, I guess when you are in control you probably feel like actually I've got this and it's near enough perfect to in your mind. If someone else saw it and they're like, what the hell's this? But then you'd be like, no, I did that. So I guess it's like now you can't control it and you're thinking, no, this could be way better, right? So it's kind of in that flip scenario, if that makes sense. But I get it from that perspective. I've personally never gone through, like I've never been a perfectionist until recently now, where I'm a bit like, but I also get it that I'm also trying to be like, if I need to get like this graphic right, I'm like, why am I trying to like we do super perfect with this? Like eventually I know the message counts and this is going to be okay and it's still going to do hits or whatever, right? That's how but we also, I realize this now that we will always be behind the scenes. We're always trying to be like as good as we possibly can be and not be happy with it. Like even the website, right? We just launched the website. It took me 4 or 5 months to go back and forth. I'm like, no, I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. Like it took me that long, where some people would have released that maybe 2 months if they wanted to. So I've now gone through a lot more now than probably most of my life. But I've also realized that I'm also aware of that. Like, okay, I'm trying to be a bit perfectionist, but also realize like it's bigger than just me putting out there. It's also like the brand image and all that kind of stuff like is big enough. That's from a business perspective. From a personal standpoint, I don't think I've ever cared that much, to be honest. But yeah, I would definitely say it from that standpoint. Yeah, it's kind of creeped in a lot more now than ever.
So that's the thing though, like I don't think that anyone, there are people that probably are perfectionist in like their entire life and they're like super OCD and they actually have this control need, which probably means that they don't feel in control, which is why they try to compensate by trying to be perfect, but then it stops them from doing anything. And that's the key. Like when we're aiming for perfection, it's actually stopping us. So I don't know if like being a perfection, like what I think what perfection is actually is procrastination in disguise, which is the second deadly trait. It's like it's procrastination in disguise. You just think that you think that things need to be perfect, but in reality you're actually procrastinating on just doing what you know you should be doing.
I also think it's a dream state as opposed to a reality state.
Yeah, like it's an illusion. There is no perfection.
Yeah.
And perfection is a subjective thing, which means that you're only striving for something that you perceive perfect, which in someone else's eye might be shit, or vice versa. Like what you perceive is like what you might have perceived in that date with Millie is like, okay, so I perceived it now to be shit because I didn't line up all my ducks and didn't go the way I wanted. But in her eyes, it might have actually been the most fantastic date she's ever been on, because it wasn't about the food. So like, I think when we're so caught up in our own head of what is good and what is bad, we actually might potentially rob other people from a good experience, because we are now almost saying like, my opinion matters more than yours.
Yeah. And it's the ability to, well, it's like creating an expectation that you're going to lose 20 kilos in 6 weeks. It's like saying that I'm going to be a millionaire by the age of 22. Like, on the outside, some people, you may see them do that, or you may see this you see that as perfect, but it's just the idealism of something as opposed to the reality of the scenario. It's like, I think it's quite common, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think perfectionism is quite common in those that are uneducated about the area, or not as educated as they could be, so that they don't have realistic expectations. But they've also been kind of brought up in a way where it's always been about A plus B equals C. If I get it perfect, then it's going to be great. Or I'm going to be, babied in a way where it's never allowed to make a mistake. Because you're never allowed to make a mistake, then you obviously are perfect. And dealing with the mistake is actually where you do most of the learnings. So I think that, again, perfectionism is procrastination in disguise, but also it's absolving yourself of probably your biggest core belief for most people, which is the fear of failure. Because you almost tick your boxes of not being fearful of failure, because if you do that perfection, then you don't fail, and then you don't get the negative connotations of what you believed failure is. Yeah. But most people that are not perfectionists and that have this growth mindset, that are ultimately working forwards, because you just don't go anywhere if you're a perfectionist, to be honest, in those areas, is that they address failure early. And I think those that actually address failure early and accept it as part of the process then remove that perfectionism, because they know that they can't get to where they want to get to without failure. If you're doing the 110-meter hurdles, at some point you're going to fucking dack it. Like that's the reality. You're never not going to hit a hurdle.
The problem is with the perfectionists that they actually don't take the action because they're waiting for it to be perfect. Like that's the problem. So they don't actually allowing themselves to fail because they don't ever take that risk of taking the action that potentially leads to failure, because it wasn't the right moment, the perfect time. My ducks is in the pond. Because of that, it's like stopping.
It's like fat loss, right? Like people on fat loss always like we used to hear a lot about. I remember early days, probably online coaching. People would be like, I'm going to start, because, it'd be like 3-month packages, right? But like, I'm going to start, I've got no holidays coming up, I've got no socials coming up. Let me do it then. Let me hold off for another couple of months. It's like, what's the point? Right. And I think it's the whole element of like, I need things to be perfect for this to happen. And I also think it could be the element of like what Nathan there said, they're not as educated. It also could be they're educated, right? So then they kind of procrastinate even more because they think, no, this needs to be element where it needs to be really, really, really perfect. Like think of school kids, right? Who are really, really like clever from a young age, right? They're used to getting perfect grades, right? And as soon as you get older and older and older, right? Let's say if you don't get those perfect grades, you start panicking, right? Because you're like, what the hell? Like, am I going to get into this school? Am I going to get into this? Am I going to get into that? And then suddenly, they either get worse or they double down and they get better. Because they've had a bit of a failure. So they need to fail in order to learn. But sometimes, I think society now is always like, you don't fail, or you can, or it's more of like participation trophies and so on, getting that. So it doesn't teach you how to fail. It doesn't, like, if there is, like in schools, I reckon now, if you go probably sports day, it will probably be the element of like, first 5 people get medals or whatever. It's like, hold on, no, first max 3 people should get medals. Right, I don't want to see 5 people getting medals. Like, what's the point of that? Like, if you finish 5th, you finish 5th for a reason. So I think that can also come into it from a sporting standpoint and school standpoint, in my opinion, as well, with the education system. But that's another topic for another day.
Yeah. What's the second one?
The second one was procrastinator, but the third one is the periodic. It's someone who's inconsistent, indecisive, and like go really hard and then comes off, like, and
All or
all of them,
nothing.
I guess they tie in together a little bit, like they do kind of go in, because like if on a fat loss journey, it's like, okay, I'm hitting all of my targets, all of my non-negotiables, and then I don't do it, and then I just don't track it. Or like I'm going to be really good and track when I am doing good, and I'm not going to track when I'm bad. Like I'm being periodic in how I approach my process in the journey. So that's another one. What do you guys take on there?
Is it that the element of like periodic is really difficult to dissect in some ways, right? Because on a practical sense, let's take fat loss, for example. Periodic can be quite important for a phase of dieting, but if it's like continually done without there being that next step of like maintaining your weight, you're just going around in that cycle.
But it's the mental shift, like it's like I'm on and then I'm off.
So it's all or nothing. Okay,
all or nothing. Yeah, that's what I thought anyway. Yeah.
So like the all or nothing is, again, probably linked to perfectionism in some way, shape, or form, because like you think you have to be perfect for a period of time, then you don't achieve that, then you do nothing because you're not being perfect. But the all or nothing is, it's not real life. It's a false economy, because nothing in your life you can do all, and nothing you can do anything. Like event, like even if put it in perspective, right? Someone goes, "Oh, I'm not doing anything towards my fitness." Okay, so are you walking outside? Yeah. Okay, so you're not doing nothing. You're still working towards your fitness because you're doing walking, right? You're not vegetating. And it's that perspective of like nothing is actually something and all is not everything. Because even in a fat loss diet, like I've never met, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys agree, I've never met anybody that does all. They say they do all, but then you dissect their day and you dissect their day to day and you realize, hey, you missed 5 grams of chicken breast on that meal. You had 155s over 150. That extra spoon of peanut butter, that's not all. Or, the 2000 missed. And I think it comes back to another negative thinking pattern. And I don't know if it's going to be part of what you said, but something I've been reading about is emotional rationalization. So people rationalize things based on their emotions, and then they get fooled into this ability to say that I'm all. They bias themselves, and me and K-Mac has spoke about this so many times in the cars in America, is the cognitive bias and the confirmation bias that you put yourself through because you think you're doing all because your emotion tells you doing everything, not logic. Yeah. And once you bridge the gap between, hey, your all is not your all and your nothing is not your nothing, then your perspective changes to potentially being like, okay, well, if I can do 80% this week, then that's fine, or 70%, or even just do as best as I can.
You segue perfectly into the fourth one, which is the pretender. Like,
yeah. The pretender, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
What a song by the Foo Fighters that is.
Let's go. 3, 2, 1.
Life, that was such a
You should have edited that and put it in there, basically.
In the morning at 6:30 and I'm wired. I mean, this Mexican coffee might just be full of cocaine. You never know.
Like I said, BBC is about to be on your case in a minute, my friend.
So pretend. Go on, K-Mac.
I was going to say, I mean, this is quite a few people. If we're going to look in the fitness realm, right? It's like, or even generally in life, because people will say, I'm going to do this, and then they never kind of go through it. Like I said, it's linked into the other ones. You got the procrastinator, you've got the, I'm going to try and make this perfect. So this, like, for example, this logo has to be perfect in order for me to then launch this, right? And if that's never perfect, it takes them a whole year. That means they never ever do that. And eventually it's that also pretenders are the ones who always talk about it quite often. And then, they're like, and their mates already know this, right? Their mates already know, like, hey, actually, yeah, this person did say that a couple of years ago, still done nothing. And then they eventually get into this, you're known as that person, which is dangerous, in my opinion. I think you become that person who doesn't do anything. There's probably another word for this, but I don't think it's pretender, but it's probably that guy who's like, I guess, waffler, you can call that person. They call them so.
All fart, no shit, that's what they're called.
Yeah, Nathan used to use that all the time. I mean, we used to talk about it. Yeah, we used to talk about it because we'd be like, this person came in, and this used to be the person, let's say from a fat loss perspective, we come in and I'm going to be a best transformation, I'm going to kill it. This is this. First week, nothing. I remember one client, I had this conversation with him. It was at about 2019, right? And he goes to me, dude, I'm going to be the best transformation ever. Like, I'm going to kill this. And obviously me, I'm like, all right, whatever, right? Obviously, look, you're talking a lot right now. It's been half an hour. I want to see what you do, potentially in about 6 months time, right? Is this transformation game is is no joke. You can talk all you want right now. And he was a business, he's an entrepreneur. So I'm thinking, okay, you know what? Entrepreneurs generally will do things that they kind of mean for. First week, he goes, I binged on ice cream. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Couldn't do that. Never heard from him after 2 weeks, ever. Right. And that was like the classic, for me, waffler / pretender. Someone who wanted it, but just really didn't want to execute.
I had this, I got two good examples of this one. One is before Christmas, take on a new client from a referral. He's like, I want you to be hard on me. I need someone with a stick to like, beat me with the accountability, right? So 10 days into January, not checked in. I dropped him an audio message and said, hey, just to let you know, I'm going to cancel your package if you don't check in, because we've got this rule now at the moment that says if you don't check in 3 times in a row, you're out effectively, because we value the check-in process. It's where we do most of our work. So we want you to value it too. He comes back and goes, I was really hurt by your message. And I didn't follow the diet for the rest of the week because I was hurt by what you said. And I was like, you asked me to be very hard on you and strict on you. And now you're being a pussy about how I spoke to you. And I literally sent him an audio message back and I said, hey mate, you asked for this. You said, be hard on me. I'm going to be a difficult client. So I need you to keep me in line. I'm keeping you in line and you don't like what I'm saying. I think you need to go and speak to a therapist.
And by the way, though, they're the worst. You know, the ones who come to you like, can you go hard on me? You know, the ones who say, can you go hard on me? I'm like, but you don't need to get hard on. Like, it's only if you do the basics and you do your job properly. Like, shout out Bill Belichick, you know, the ones who say it all the time. If you do your job properly, like, no one needs to go hard on you, right? And I think these people already kind of, it's again, before they even started the process, they already know. It's like, why do you need to go hard on people? Like, why do you need to do that kind of situation? And I'm always baffled when people come to us as well and be like, I need you to go hard on me. I'm like, interesting. That means you're probably going to flop. You're going to be a pretender in 3 months' time, and you're going to be probably a sensitive guy or a woman, for example. So like we've seen that. I remember you used to tell me a story one time about, I don't know if you want to kind of share it, but I remember it was a client who you just had a Zoom chat with, and you just said, just stop. I don't want you to talk because you're just talking. And I want you to just, like, this is what we're going to do. Do you remember that? I remember you told me that story, and I was like, that's like a good example of someone who went from pretender to then action, because we had to make them aware of that, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that was like, it wasn't from the beginning either. Like, it was like multiple weeks of like saying I'm going to do something, comes back around, same story again. And it was like 12 weeks into the process, and he's doing the same thing on a Zoom chat. And I just said, mate, can I just stop you for a minute? The thing that you're doing right now is the reason why you've not got the results. Ultimately, you're always talking about the future, and you're always talking about what you're going to do next week and what you're going to do the week after and how that's going to be great and all this type of stuff. But I just want you to look at the factual information behind you. Every week you've said the same thing and none of it's worked. So why do you believe that the next week is going to be different? Next week is going to be different after that, if you're not doing anything different than you've done before? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take all that thought process about the future and put it away, because it doesn't mean shit. What you said before has not led to the results. And ultimately what we need is factual information to support our evidence. At the moment, the factual information is supporting you say stuff and never do it towards your fitness goals. So what we're going to do is take the practicality into this and say, hey, what are you going to do right now? Like, have you got a shopping in? Have you got your meal prep sorted? No. Okay, cool. What time is it there? Okay, cool. It's 6 p.m. in the UK. Okay, cool. What are you doing this evening? Oh, nothing, just watching TV. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to end this call now. You've got the meal plan and the shopping list that we gave you. I want you to get your shoes on and go and get the meal prep done, and send me a picture of you doing your meal prep in 1 hour's time. That was the bit that changed him to moving from future to now. And ever since that, the guy stayed in shape. And he's now not worked with me for a couple of years. And he's still in where he needs to be right now, and referred a load of people to me because of that moment. Like, after that, before that, he still messages me and says, look, bro, the moments that you gave help me with is the reason why I'm where I'm at in my business and my life and my family life, because all he used to do was chat shit, not get banged, you know? So.
And he does listen to this podcast, so he knows who he is, basically. So yeah, it would be good. But we're not going to mention any names. But I think that for me was a good example of someone who is like a typical A1, you know, talks a good game, and then as soon as it comes down to actual action, it's like, brother, what's going on? I see nothing here right now. So I think, to me, I've seen loads of people like that. In my opinion, there's a lot of pretenders. That's why I think, you know, everyone wants that before and after picture, but they don't realize the work you need to put in. together.
Do you think and this will probably do you think that the future is basically future proofing and like the whatever you just called them is linked back to anxiety and uncertainty, because we know that the future is linked with that, right? So if they're trying to constantly talk, they're quite uncertain about the future, and they're trying to make this thing that they're trying to do certain by saying that they're going to do these certain things. Do you think it has that link to uncertainty, anxiety, and like fear, because it's always about the future?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when people talk, it's to either step away from what they're feeling, right? So they keep talking so that like as long as they talk, they can say whatever they want, but they can't lie to themselves, but they can keep talking so that everyone else believes that, so if I believe that you believe that what I'm saying is true, then it make me feel a little bit better about myself, because I fool everyone, but I can never ever lie to myself. So I think people that talk, they just kind of make up for the fact that they know they have issues, but they don't know how to deal with them, so they will continue to talk.
Yeah. That's a banger, actually. That's a banger. And I think what that relates back to as well was in like, I don't know how many coaches listen to this or like clients, but ultimately each week there will be always a persuasion of truth in most people's check-ins to create a certain scenario that is advantageous for them. But they will always give you some element of non-truths or hold back or withhold information that result in their actuality not being the same thing that they perceive in their brain. If they believe that they're perfect, then they won't give you information that supports that they're not perfect. If their fear of failure or the core belief is their biggest thing, then they will give things that support that they succeeded, but equally not mention that much about the way that they failed. And that is emotional intelligence. And I think over time, even if that's not a word, because Jordan Peterson's gone around telling it's not a thing, but I like it, is that thing is really important when it comes to tackling your negatives or the things that are holding you back. The shielding of these things to yourself is only what's making this work. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to say, hey, I had a howler this week and it sucked, and I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I didn't do the things, and that will then lead to these things of like, check-ins or people talking about what they're going to do in the future because they didn't speak about what they did in the past. And I had one today, coach, lovely lady, and she's one of my favorite clients and best, and she's normally nails, but she spent 3 minutes on an audio message speaking about what she's going to do next week. And I just audio message back and said, hey, bodyweight, I know you said that bodyweight's going up and stuff like that, but you actually just spent 3 minutes talking about what you're going to do next week. But I'd like to know what you actually did this week. And then she was like, oh, wow, yeah, busted. I actually didn't even catch myself there. This is what I did last week, and this is why I was probably thinking about the future way too much. And it was all because of the failures or the things that she didn't do last week, trying to atone and double down. It's the thing that Schultz says all the time. People do one or two things, right? They either avoid the situation, or they double the fuck down on what's happening. They double down massively. And most people either double down or they avoid, and then neither one is positive.
So let's move on, because we got two more, and I think those are kind of two of the more important ones as well. Pleaser, number 5.
Oh, people pleasers.
Basically, you value other people's opinions more than you value your own. You put other people in front, like other people's needs in front of your own. And I know, and you can probably agree with me that this is a common trait for all the women.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I would say this is more applicable for the women that we coach, by the nature that is how we've been conditioned through generations of what it means to be a woman, to actually please and to be available and to, put other people's needs in front of our own. I just need to, yeah, you guys take over because this dog is eating my laptop charger.
I thought you were just shouting, so I was thinking, oh shit.
Yeah. I think it comes back to the major word, which no one, this is something we're going to talk about, our autonomy so much, is agreeableness. Agreeableness is the trait in which you are higher agreeable, so you agree to things based on other people's perception, or you are low agreeable. Now, I was having a chat with a guy who actually runs an app, Tim Johnson. He used to work with us at R&T. A fucking nice dude, lives in Singapore. He worked with us for a while now, and I didn't realize we got on a call, and because he moved from Teddy, who left, and then now he came to me to kind of get coached. He's like, we've got an app. We're building like a new app called Coupley. And basically it's for couples to improve their relationship. And by the way, shout out, we're going to be sponsors of Coupley, because me and Millie have been doing this and it's phenomenal. Like there's everything from like communication styles that they'll compare yours and the other person's to see if you're a match. And then it'll ask you questions about what you should do with the other person. You set dates in the diary, you set like things to do for each other. You also then answer questions about each other. So you know, like it's a phenomenal app. But one of the things he spoke about was like one of the traits and behaviors that he struggles with is that agreeableness is, and we know from like the work of Jordan Peterson and other people where he speaks about it a lot. And when he gets asked about feminism, but also asked about women's wages versus guys' wages, the thing about most things, not in all senses, because this is a long-winded topic, but there is a level of agreeableness that women will take over guys compared in most people, that will then result in them not getting higher paid jobs because they don't ask for more money, or they just take what's given. And one of the massive traits of staying in shape and doing something that is a new habit is being low on the agreeable scale. This is why CEOs, entrepreneurs, critical thinkers are really low on the agreeable scale. And that's why they do so well being objective, is because they don't give a fuck about what other people think, because they're lowly agreeable. They've already got in their mind, prove me right, as opposed to, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. And the people that have low agreeable psychology will have higher levels of dietary adherence. Yep. So you can either choose to be better agreeable in terms of like your mental state or your mindset around being pleaser, so you can change that over time to make yourself higher than others in terms of a self-esteem perspective, or you have to have developed specific strategies to know that you're an agreeable person to make up for the losses. And that agreeable nature is so prevalent within the female community, especially the Asian community, where women are almost like expected to do certain things. It's now will come to in the next 10 years, we're going to have lots of independent boss ass females from the Indian community that are like, I'm not doing the cooking, I'm not doing the cleaning. We're getting it now. I'm not doing what we did last time. I'm not being that mum, stay-at-home mum. I'm not being that person that gets his dinner cooked on the table. That's highly low agreeable. And I think it's also a Western world philosophy as well, especially with the new rise of like business owners, self-employed is the way to go, not working a 9 to 5, doing whatever you want to do. So the agreeable less is less. But over time, those conditions of agreeable, you must do this, you must do that, using guilt and shame to make people do that, has made these women conditional to being agreeable. And therefore, when they try and do something for themselves in other parts of their life, they almost follow those patterns. And therefore, they struggle to break out of those, or they don't have the strategies enough to be agreeable, but also not take the piss. So
a lot of people who are having the pleasing mentality as well, they please based on what they believe the other person wants from them. So it's not actually always based on the facts.
Yeah.
It's like, if I don't put on makeup and a really lovely dress and high heels, then my partner won't feel like I'm attractive. So I'm going to do it because I believe that's what he wants me to do. Whereas the partner might be like, I just like you in your flats. And when you go like with your hair down and like just feel very comfortable, right? So sometimes the pleasing mentality creeps in because our beliefs are we place our beliefs on what we perceive other people needs from us.
It's perception rather than like a reality.
So it shows up in, yes, conditioning through generations of culture, but it also shows up in our beliefs, what other people want from us, which may or may not be true.
And it comes back down to that. Ask a good question, get a good answer. Assume a shit question, get a shit answer. And the element of what I've learned over the course of maybe the last 6 months is legitimately just asking, what is it that you would like me to do that would feel comfortable for you in this scenario? Like, what is it that you're trying to get? What is it that would be your desirable response from me in this scenario? And that is factual information, that's evidence. And then if someone goes, like, and this is what the scenario is going to play like. It's going to be like, I just want you to enjoy yourself and be happy and not be like, I want you to be healthy and I just want you to enjoy, food and not be so restrictive. Okay, cool. And then you can then rebuttal that with evidence of why that thing that you're doing right now is not the thing that they perceive, but then you're not perceiving them as doing something for you that is not negative too. So like if a Indian lady goes to her mum's house and goes, what is it that you what is it that you want? Why is it that you want me to have this second plate of food? Or why is it that you want me to have the baked goods that you've got? Well, I've made it. I want to make you happy and I thought I'd do this. Okay, cool. And then you say, okay, well, I'll have one and I'll be able to enjoy that. But that would be my enjoyment. I'm getting enjoyment from that one thing that I've had, or just being here with you guys is my enjoyment. Or having and partaking in the food is my enjoyment, as opposed to that second plate of food. And then you build on that communication, because you've gone from assumption and then you've gone to what is it that they want out of that scenario, and then you get what you want out of that scenario, and then you find that way that what you want and what they want is exactly the same thing, and it comes in different forms. They perceive you to take enjoyment from 2 plates of food, you take enjoyment from eating their food and then not being forced to have more than what you want. So then you meet in the middle with the two, and that's where the communication comes. But it's all down to that supporting evidence as opposed to and factual information, as opposed to mind reading, which is another one of the negative thinking traits.
Yeah,
I was going to say that, like, a lot of times it's a lot of assumptions rather than actual reality. Or you said there's another word, which is communication. Actually just communicate. Like, I've done that as an Asian. I can speak about this because I'm like, I've actually done that growing up. I was like, I want to do this and it makes me happy. This is the reason why. And then eventually, as the years have gone on, people around me have actually understood it. Right now, obviously it's my career, etc. They get it even more now. But there was a period where it wasn't my career. It was just like hobby. So people were like, this doesn't make sense. And this is actually very, very, very interesting. So for me, it was also the element of like communicating a lot to people what this meant to me, and like essentially my own happiness, right? Because you only dictate your own happiness. Because then if you start pleasing people, and then let's say things do go wrong, you're going to be unhappy for pretty much the whole day, the whole week, the whole month, the whole year potentially, because what you had in your own head, and again, you're just in your own head then. That's another thing, right? That's probably another thing, which is like most people are in their own head more than actually understanding the actual reality of what's going on in that actual moment. That's what I think comes down to probably communication and understanding people's communication styles as well, probably.
Yeah, I agree. But also ultimately, if you are adamant to continue to please others, you're actually choosing a life of never choosing yourself, which means at the end of the day, you'll actually die regretting the things you didn't do for yourself. Like the number one regrets of a dying person is not to be true to who you are and do the things that you wanted to do. So like, I think if we can learn to meditate on death more often, we recognize that we can challenge the choices we do and why we do them. But I want to bring it into the last one, which is number 6. And I think this one can actually be the biggest destroyer of our success and our happiness. Can anyone guess which one it is? It's another P.
I thought it was comparison.
Nah.
I thought it was going to say comparison syndrome, but
P. Oh, this is a good game. Can you act it out in like dance?
Pride.
It's like
Pride.
Right.
If you are too prideful to accept that you don't know it all, and you continue bashing on with the same way, you don't ask for help, you are like the silent sufferer, or you just believe that your way is the way and it's not working, and you're too stubborn to change it, what's going to happen?
Yeah, the older you get, like you always say, the old heads, they never will change, right? It's like the whole thing, when the older you get, like you become more prideful of your own beliefs, your own philosophies, and that's all you know, basically, right?
I really suck at this as well. I like, for me, this is a paradox between 2 separate lives that I probably live, personal and business. And that's just the way that I grew up over the last maybe 10 years. Most people know my stories and stuff like that, and I've been very, very heavily 90% business or work and 10% personal. And we're now coming to the point where I'm probably 60 personal, 40 work, in my opinion anyway. We're a bit and in my business life or my work life, I'm very much don't have a pride, very passionate about it, happy to be wrong, always moving forward, always highly opinionated, but that's fine. But has the ability to be proven wrong, and actually will change everything I do if that thing is logical and it makes sense. Like, you know, we've had conversations before, all three of us in separate scenarios where you've been like, okay, this da 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 da, and I've been like, oh shit, actually that makes sense. I'll change what I do, and then just change it instantly on the spot because it makes sense. Whereas in my personal life, I feel like pride is a massive thing that I'm still undergoing the exposure of. Because for me, I know those moments with the dog. It's like Luna was exactly the same, right, in the podcast. So maybe we'll call this dogcast because we've had dogs on this one all the time.
Yeah.
So with personal stuff, you almost have to accept that A, you're not perfect, and then two is that you're still working at stuff. And for me, that has always been a really hard thing, especially if the person that I'm with knows me on both sides. They know that I'm critically, you know, objective, and I handle stuff business in a different fashion. But then when I'm personal, I really struggle with doing the same thing in both sides. And it probably comes down to the element of like being vulnerable and being open to like, oh shit, that this was my bad, or I didn't do the things that I was supposed to, or I'm not the picture of the person that maybe you imagine me to be. But equally, that's my impersonation of what they believe I'm to be, as opposed to what they believe for me to be true. So yeah, pride is like still something that's probably one out of the six that I think is I've got so much work to do on the personal side of things. I'm absolutely fine on my own and my own bubble, but as soon as other people come in there, it's like I find it hard to be like, yeah, I'm actually struggling with this or whatnot. Like, and I see this all, and then we want to relate that back to fitness. I see this all the time. Even when you give someone tasks to do, you give them multiple choices of food intake, you give them methodologies, you give them methods. One large thing is that whatever they believe to be true, they're very going to be stuck in that moment, and then it's the pride to reach out and say, hey, I'm really, really struggling. And normally when they do that, it's already far too gone in the thing that could have been solved very, very simply, that they then want to like kind of, they branded it as it's not working for them. And like I had one yesterday where a lady said, this is not working for me. And then I asked her what she's been doing, and no wonder it's not been working, because it's nothing I set her to do. Like she's trying to go for dinners and eat salads at every single restaurant that she goes to, so she feels deprived. That she's eating the same meal plan every single day, when that's not what we're supposed to do. Like that's not what our methodologies are. But she got in her brain that that's what we were asking her to do, and it took her 3 or 4 weeks to get the pride to come up and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And now she's thinking that the service is not for her, when actually if we could have caught that at the beginning, or pride was at a less level and she just wanted clarity or curiosity to kind of make sure that she was doing everything that she wanted to do, it would have been it is a different story. So it's often a silent killer.
Perception as well though, right? So even for her, like she may perceive like, oh, every training is the same, right? Or every training, coaching, something is the same. She may have had experience from before where it's probably like that, where it was like, you can't go out, it's going to give me salads. Because I've obviously had like a lady join us from another coaching company, and it was literally the rules where you can't go out. It's the same meal plan for 12 weeks straight. So like it was one of those where like it reminded me of that, basically, where she probably had that perception maybe from something else previously. Who knows? It could be.
I think, Nate, you said a word there, which I think is very important to highlight, vulnerability, because I think pride is the thing. Like if we don't dare to be vulnerable, it's the pride that stops us. Like they're so heavily interlinked, and you can't be vulnerable and prideful at the same time. Like you can't. I think I would agree. Like I would want to say that that's the complete opposite. Like so the only way to solve it is to actually go, okay, actually there are things that I'm hesitant to let go of, belief systems, or oh my god, sorry. She was like nibbling at my fucking nipple.
I saw that. I was like,
that's
Jesus, that hit hard.
Hey, I just saw you go like this, and I was like, oh shit.
Get on it.
Her teeth are so fucking sharp as well. Like get out.
Whatever you're into, Em. If you like it rough and ready, that's fine.
Exactly. I actually lost my plan. Yeah, like
so
let's just cut it off now.
Sensory stimulated. I'm going for a shower.
Yeah.
Emma's traumatized.
I feel a bit vulnerable right now.
There you go. The thing about vulnerability, right, is that conditionally it's a negative, but actually fundamentally it's the only truth that you have. It's truth. And it's the biggest power that you have. Angela says to me all the time, like the way that you're vulnerable with me, but also with other people when you have those conversations, is your biggest strength in those scenarios. And I think the vulnerability of the pride thing then overlaps in every single other thing that we just spoke about from 5 things, right? So if you think you're a perfectionist, and your pride is that, or your identity is that, then you will less likely be open about the failures. If you think that if you like to speak about things and you're just a predictor and you're just a person that just talks and talks and talks and never does anything, that's then linked to a pride thing, because once you become the thing that you don't think is true, or you are expose yourself to the thing that you aren't, then that can hit your pride massively. And it's something that's built up over time, because it's the story that we tell ourselves, it's the identity that we have of ourselves. And when you put those things together, you wrap yourself up in cotton wool in some way, shape, or form. And that's then links back to that perfectionism thing of, the fear of failure is that, it's deemed negative to say or express the truths of, I'm struggling with this, or I'm not doing too well, or I did 80% of what you're supposed to do, or I didn't do everything that was supposed to be on the list, or I didn't do this, that, and the other, or I didn't make that saving this month. And it's like, none of it really matters when you take out all those other 6 and you just work on that pride element of just going for your truth. This is what I did this week, this is what I did. And regardless of how hard that intermediate process is of saying the truth, then it probably actually just gets rid of all the rest of them in some way, shape, or form. If you become vulnerable, then you can work on the others. The moment that you're not vulnerable, you're closed off, or you are not open to opening yourself up for interpretation the way that you may perceive yourself differently, then you never get to change. You never get to change at all. And like, the process of change is ultimately, the first step is always like an awareness. And the awareness means that you have to show a difference, or the gap between your pride and the logical, factual information. And depending on how big that gap is, the gap will then be probably the force multiplier of feeling exposed. Yeah. So like, if you are highly different to the way that you go, and this is why when people have 20 years or 30 years of eating a certain way, doing a certain thing, they've built this massive gap between logical, actual information and what they perceive to be true. And that the middle gap is pride, but then it also is vulnerability, because pride will increase. This is my opinion, so I'm happy to be wrong, but pride will increase, or ego will increase, as vulnerability also gets, the potential for vulnerability increases as well, if you aren't aware of that. So you'll build up things, stories that you tell yourself, you'll build up things that support and go, navigate in the right direction. You'll confirm your biases, you'll move back around. And as you're doing all of this snaking stuff, that spectrum there is vulnerability, but also pride. So the closer, the more you want to change it, the more this gap then gets hit with a fucking baseball bat in the face. But the closer that you have it, the pride and then vulnerability will then also decrease as well, potentially, if you learn to tackle it and bridge the gap between factual and logical information, and then the stories that we tell ourselves.
I also think it's that identity thing as well, right? Like, once you're aware of it, you have to cultivate this new identity. It's like, for all of us guys, right? If we take all our examples, it's like, we went from people who were at one point out of shape when we got into this journey. We had to realize we now need to change this. And then suddenly it flipped into this identity that, okay, I now go to the gym. People know me as the gym guy, and then eventually become a coach. And then people know you as, okay, you're the coach now, and then eventually become a business owner, and so on. Like, we're always changing identities, and that's okay. Because I do believe that can actually just allow us to also grow at the same time as well. I think that's where the growth tends to happen for most people. But sometimes most people don't change that much. Alex Hormozy says it's the best. People just stay the same 20 times a year. They don't change. They stay the same 20 times a year. Like, just picture that as well. Yeah, hope that helps. Any final words from you, Em?
No, I think this was a really good episode. It was nice to hear your opinions and like your maybe where you were like, okay, let's just put it like this, because I want to know how many of these 6 do you actually recognize yourself in? And it doesn't have to be like, it can be in one area of your life, but like, do you recognize how many of them in your life right now?
I was them before, I would say. Like, I was that, like, probably, like, if people knew me in high school and stuff, I was probably that person who was probably a waffler, was a pretender, but then I had to work really, really hard not to be that person. Like, if you speak to my mom, and my mom would be like, yeah, because I was always lazy, right? But now I'm the complete opposite of that, in my opinion, right? I still may not be in someone else's eyes, but in my opinion now, I'm like, I'm like, no. But if I catch if my mom says it now, I'll be like, that was me 10 years ago. It's me completely different now. So I would say I was probably a large part of that before. Now I've been very aware of like who I am and who I want to be. So I continuously trying to work towards that. I think that's the key. Is like what Nathan said. It was be aware and then catch yourself and then say, okay, cool. This is what I want to be now. In I don't know, a year's time, 2 years time, 3 years time. But I would definitely say when I was in like high school and stuff like that, I was that person for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, there'll always be small elements of things that always creep back in. I think that the more daunting or the more challenging things that you put yourself through, the more probably exposure that you can have to these particular patterns being opened up again, because ultimately you're forming new things, which then challenges you in a certain mindset, emotional capabilities, which then allows there's a gap of margin to let it be filled with these potential negatives. And I think over time, if you don't stay, like for me, it's like I have to stay aware and stay like mentally astute in terms of like how am I feeling, maybe journaling about it, maybe talk to Angela about it, and just checking and sense checking that the direction that I'm going is the one in which I perceive it to be, and then I'm not just lying to myself as I go through. So in all of those like 6 different ways. So I think when I start something new, especially if it's something I've never done before, then those things start out as like the driver, but then by the time the task is finished, I've navigated my way through those particular patterns, because I don't think, for me, they don't leave. They're just less of a voice of reason in my brain as actuality. They're just more thoughts now. And if we know how many thoughts you have on a day-to-day basis, 5,800, 6,000 steps, 6,000 thoughts on a day-to-day basis, then you're okay to have the thoughts of those particular things, but it doesn't mean they're true, and it's up to you whether you believe them or you challenge them. That's what happens to me anyway on a regular. If we're growing at a rapid speed every single month, there's new things coming on every single month, and that step happens every single time. One of those 6 probably creep up. I then squash it and say, hey, that's bullshit, or that's not factual information, or that doesn't need to be perfect, or that doesn't need to be me speaking about it. I just need to do it. And then next step is then the overcoming of that, and then next one, then you bridge that gap to where you want to be. What about you, Em?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've had the policing mentality for a long time, and I feel like I literally killed that bitch. Yeah, definitely like the perfectionist procrastinator, and it stems back to the fear of being insignificant, not being good enough. Like it always comes back to those, But I think some of the things that can helps myself, and it can help other people to move away from them. You have to acknowledge that they are there. Like suppressing what's going on never actually helps you get rid of it. It's always going to be there. So number 1 is always like acceptance, right? Okay, I'm running this trait. But I think some things comes down to some things, which means if you don't have clarity, well, you're going to be either a perfectionist, you might be periodic, you might not even know what you're doing, like because you don't have clarity of what you're doing. If you don't care for your mental well-being, like you're overwhelmed all the time, you're too stressed, like these are the times when things are going to creep up on you. Like if you are stressed, you're going to be in fight or flight, so you're going to have more of a tunnel vision, which means that you're going to like always feel attacked in a way, because that's what your body is feeling inside, which means that you actually can't be your most resourceful self, which means that you're going to revert to these things because it's a way of you trying to be controlling. It's like, I need control because I feel like I have no control. And then, yeah, I think those were my 2, to like have more clarity and like really have strategies where you work on your stressors, because if you don't, these things are the things that are going to stop you to move forward. And they kind of go like interlinked, but start with one, and then the other one should be better.
They get better because you're more aware. That's the thing.
Yeah.
As time goes on, like you start to become, oh, I used to do this, now I don't do that. Now I used to do that, now you just start becoming like aware of the process, and it's a process at the end of the day, right?
Out of all of these, I would say then like the biggest one to work on is the pride, because if you don't think that, like if you, and I've been there, and I'm sure that you guys have been there, it's well, I'm indestructible. I can continue to work like this forever. And my pride tells me that I can, because I look at social media and it looks like everyone is working 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so my pride tells me that I should be able to do this.
I feel like it's opposite. Hold on, I feel like it's opposite.
What do you mean?
Like I feel like most people, again, people will show you bits and pieces of it, but are people actually working 18 hours a day? Like
No,
if
but this is
everyone's,
just an example. Like it could be whatever. It could be
yeah, I
whatever.
get it, yeah.
And it's the pride that then will go, okay, I can't accept that maybe I'm getting burned out. I can't accept that I'm feeling shit. And therefore I'm just going to keep pushing because I can't accept it because it makes me feel bad about myself. So pride, I think if you start working on that, it kind of makes you more able to see the other ones. Because if you don't want to accept that you have a pride that kind of runs your life, then yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Powerful. Let's talk about in next week's podcast. Actually, I think it'd be good. What Nathan mentioned at the start, negative thought patterns, language patterns, I think would be really, really good. Because I think a lot of people do go through that. They're not aware of it, in my opinion. So I think we can definitely tackle that.
Yeah, just a teaser for people, unhelpful thinking styles, all or nothing, overgeneralizations, a mental filter on the evidence, disqualifying the positives, jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing and minimization, emotional reasoning, using critical words like should and ought, and labeling, and then personalization, this is my fault, blaming yourself. So they're the negative thinking patterns. And when I looked at this, I got sent it when I first started with Angela, completely ignored it because I was like, I'll deal with that at some point, that's fine. And then as you deal with the big rocks, then this becomes a big rock because you're like, how much of my day is spent in these patterns? And I can honestly say that for the last 10 years of my life, I've probably spent most of my 60%, 70% of my headspace in these negative thinking patterns in some way, shape, or form. Things that I've created in the past have come from these negative headspaces. The way I believe stuff in certain situations come from these positions, and they all weren't the way that I designed them to be. And it's very interesting. So the awareness of those things are going to be great for people, because once they know it's unhelpful, then you can then change that perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be powerful. Apart from that, guys, if you have any questions for us, anything regarding all of what we just mentioned today, feel free to reach out. Apart from that, subscribe, listen, send it to friends or family that will be finding this very, very useful. And until next time, au revoir.
Ciao.